Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for Why Invest in a Customer Success Platform, the business case. We're really excited to have you here, and we're excited to introduce our presenters, Daniella Degrace, Jason Tham, and Mark Stevenson, as well our moderator, Paul Philp, the CEO of Amity. Just some housekeeping notes before we get started. If you want to join the conversation online, specifically on Twitter, you can mention us at @GetAmity or follow the webinar with the hashtag #PracticalCustomerSuccess. We'll be sending you the slides and the recording at the end of the session, so not to worry. And there'll be Q&A at the end. So save your questions to the end, and we'll definitely get around to answering them. We're excited to hear all your questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Paul Philp, the moderator.
Great. Thank you very much, Matthew. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. My name is Paul Philp. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Amity. Amity sells customer success solution. So obviously, I'm very excited about today's session. I'm very pleased to introduce our three panelists today. Jason Tham is the CEO of Nulogy Software here in Toronto. Full disclosure, Jason was a very early customer of Amity, and he'll be the Amity customer representative in the discussion. Daniella Degrace is the CEO of Gemba Software out on the East Coast. And then Daniella has a long history in customer success before becoming the CEO of Gemba, and she was the EVP of Customer Success at Radian6 and Salesforce. And also joining us today is Mark Stevenson, who is the CFO of Igloo Software in Kitchener-Waterloo, just outside of Toronto. I'm very, very pleased to have all the panelists here, and perhaps the panelists could take a moment to introduce yourself to everybody. Then I'm going to kick off with a few questions. But if anybody has any questions for the panelists at any time, please just type the questions in, and I'd much rather use your questions than my questions. Great. So Jason, if you can introduce yourself for a moment, and then we'll get started with. Okay.
Sure. Hopefully everyone can hear me. As Paul mentioned, my name is Jason Tham. I'm CEO of Nulogy Corporation. We're a SaaS company that is focused on supply chain solutions. We're a B2B solution that connects brands and manufacturers to make more personalized and customized products. Our solutions and customers are across 5 continents and over 15 countries, and our solutions offered in over half a dozen languages. It's a fairly complex product, and prior to this, I've done business development, engineering my background, but helped grow other B2B companies prior to this company, Nulogy. So happy to be here and to discuss and share some ideas of how Amity's helped us grow over the last several years, and how we see Amity and sort of customer success as a whole as part of our strategy.
Great. Thanks, Jason. And the next panelist, just jump in and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Daniella Degrace. I'm the CEO of Gemba Software Solutions. And we are also a business with a SaaS model that provides an application to customers in order to help them develop and document their business process and integrate it with their business system. So that's what I'm currently working on. Prior to that, so this is my 4th startup. Prior to that, I've held various roles in customer success, both with Salesforce and Radian6 for many years. And I have experience in starting customer success from the ground floor in a startup, and then bringing that and integrating it into a relatively large organization of 15,000 people. And so I have experience in the different stages of rolling out customer success. In addition, the last 3 startups that I was with went through an M&A exercise where we sold for over $1 billion. And so a lot goes into thinking as you're developing your customer success organization and you transfer into an acquired company, how does that map out? So I have a lot of experience there as well.
Great. Thanks, Daniella. And Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mark Stevenson. I'm the CFO here at Igloo Software. We provide a modern corporate intranet, much different than the intranets of the early 90s when things were starting to take off. Like my colleague panelists here, I've had a varied and sundry career in both large business and startup business, from companies where we were 8 people and selling them to taking companies public in the U.S. during the dot-com craze of the mid-90s. So wide and varied experience there. Our platform is focused on communication, collaboration, and knowledge management within an organization and helping you achieve productivity gains through those processes. Like some of these other companies, we're small and growing quickly, and being SaaS-based, things like customer retention are really at the forefront of our thinking and our patterns.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for introducing yourself. I'm going to kick off with a general question about customer success. How do you view customer success at your company or in previous roles? What's the strategic impact of customer success at your organization, and why would it be important to the CEO or the board?
So maybe I'll jump in, Paul, and start the ball rolling. So in a SaaS model, the MRR revenue base and its growth really is critical to the success of the company, both in the short term and in the long term impact. The nature of the model of monthly revenue is that the customer really has, obviously he pays every month, and the customer has the opportunity to question himself every month of the value of your offering and the value of your business relationship. So in essence, you are really selling to that same customer every month on your value. So to do that, you really have to have a really close day-to-day operational relationship with your customers. Understand how they use the product, understand how often they're using it, how it creates continuous value to their business. So obviously this takes a lot of time away from your sales team. And clearly you want your hunters to keep aggressively hunting for that next brand. So in addition, a true sales hunter often don't have the right skills to manage the day-to-day detail-oriented delivery of that contract. So the fact, and another point to consider is that the fact that your service is easy to activate sometimes can also be misleading because customer thinks it's also easy to operationalize. One of the things that I've often seen as we start rolling out our first customers is that immediately you see a slowdown in how they're deploying your customer. And that's because they're realizing the complexity of the operation. If you don't have a close relationship of the day-to-day deployment of that customer, you might miss that slowdown, and that slowdown could eventually lead to causing a dissatisfied customer. It's that revenue model that depends on that recurring revenue that you really can't afford to lose that momentum with your customers. You also don't want to have to restart your hunter's sales cycle on that same brand over and over again. What we found was that customer satisfaction and customer success really goes hand in hand, really at the starting point of your relationship with that customer and all the way down through that sales cycle. And so for us, having that initial investment in customer success when we first started our company was actually very critical.
I think I would add to that.
Go ahead.
I was going to chime in and say, I think I would add to that from a bean counter point of view is along the same lines, which is, it's much cheaper to keep a customer than to have to go out and sell a new one every time and repeat that sales process. And
exactly.
SaaS-based enterprises are based on the recurring revenue model. So the fact that you sell and have a portion of your initial sale be implementation as well as the recurring piece, the more you can maximize the recurring piece, the better valuation you gain for your enterprise. And to the extent that you can keep your customers renewing continuously, our model is a little bit different. We sell on 1 to 5 year contracts, but I still have to deal with renewal every 1, 2, 3 years, depending on the customer. And the more I can keep those customers already happy and keep them captive, it just increases my valuation because I'm building off a bigger base every year in terms of my revenue streams. The other thing is that customer success isn't just once your customer has been sold and then you hand it over to an account manager to maintain a relationship. It's all about your implementation and the service delivery as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Agree with certainly what Daniella and Mark are talking about, and the importance of ensuring that and recognizing that once a customer is won, it's a lot more efficient to obviously keep that customer and also grow that customer base. Here at Nulogy, we have a fairly complex product that touches various parts within our customer's base, from users at the C-level down to sort of the frontline business development folks and also the shop floor manufacturing folks. So being a supply chain operations system here of record for these large brands, whether it be Kraft or Procter & Gamble and some of the also smaller manufacturers that service them, the different use cases and having a close intimacy of how we're affecting that user is very important, not just at the organizational level, and having what's important to us and how we strategically view customer success is having the intimacy to have the predictability to ensure that a customer is successful. And I want to have that prevalent through our entire employee base, not just our customer success team, which I'm sure at some point we'll probably talk about how that might be structured, but that visibility in terms of metrics to our whole company of how from a development perspective, this certain feature is effectively making a customer more successful in their day-to-day life. And what we sell is, at the end, is not software, it's outcomes. So making sure that outcome of what they hope to achieve with our solution is tracked and is important for us.
Awesome, great. Thanks everyone, great answers. And so I'm just going to ask, where does customer success report in your company, and why did it make sense to structure it that way?
Go ahead.
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. All right, I was going to say ladies first, but since you went first last time, I'll take it. For us, it's we see customer success as a cross-company cultural impact. So the way we've structured our organizational design-wise, we have a customer success leader, a VP, that is on the senior leadership team, and this individual has a team that is customer success managers. So that person reports to me, the leader reports to me, and they have a metric that goes to the board, or several metrics that go to the board, but that's today how we're structured. So they have the management influence, but also the importance across the entire organization and the other leaders.
Yeah, and I'll support that in terms of having visibility and being implemented and having a presence of customer success across the entire company. For us, customer success has always reported either to the CEO or to the COO, depending on the size of the company. And primarily because a couple of reasons. The first one is that the mindset of customer success really needs to start at the CEO level. It really needs to be embraced by the entire company, because ultimately, and at the end of the day, customer success, everybody within the company will play a role in accomplishing that. The second reason why they report to the CEO and the COO is because the key performance indicators that the VP customer success manages directly influence a couple of things: revenue retention, revenue growth, and product direction. And all three has a very significant impact in the overall general business direction.
I would echo that. In our organization right now, our customer success team reports to me, as I'm responsible for all revenue and bookings. As we're growing, we're going to expand that team out further and have a separate vice president that will oversee it, and it will involve more than just the account management side and growing the business in existing accounts, but also encompass other parts of our solution delivery aspects as well. Right now, it's reporting to me because I have the key visibility and metrics on all the KPIs that we can then monitor and act against and adjust course.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing to consider as well is the scalability and the international footprint that your company has. Because I think that what you're going to find as well is, depending on how you're structured, very often you'll also have VPs that are located in all the different regions. So let's say you have 3 geographical regions. You might want to, as you scale, consider putting senior leadership in each of your region as well. And that way you're really ensuring that customer success essence is represented across in the different ways that the specific regions value what customer success means.
Great.
I was going to just comment that in our several years that we evolved we realized that it had to be someone at the table at the leadership level, and I think in the beginning it probably wasn't that way. And you evolve from having probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, eventually a team, and that's at least our journey through that process. And we do have customer success managers that are in Europe, in the U.S., and in various parts of the world, and so to have a solution that unifies that view across that team of the customers, because that customer might have different divisions in our case, and to have that single pane of glass effectively and that coordination was important to have the leader at the senior leadership team level.
Yeah, correct.
That.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Great answers. Okay, so who in the audience today is going to be the first person to ask a question? Someone's got to be the first, and it might as well be you. So we're waiting for our first question, and while that's coming in, I'm going to turn to talking about how do you think in general about investing in business technology or in software that's strategic to your business. So before diving right into the specifics of customer success software, what are the general criteria that you think about when assessing an investment in a business technology?
Well, I know from our point of view, we always evaluate things against cost versus the expected impact. And impact could be new revenue, it could be efficiencies that we can quantify and measure. And a great example is, as we've been growing and scaling, we moved from a very simple accounting system, simply accounting, into an ERP, and when we moved to NetSuite. And from the financial point of view, while NetSuite is significantly a larger investment than what we had, it provides significant benefits. So I'm not doing everything manually and then inputting it into a system so I have a ledger to audit. I now have a great ledger system that provides analysis and provides results, and then I can actually have time to interpret those results and make decisions around it. So we really work on what is critical in terms of providing scalability and providing value to the business, as we've decided to define and measure value as the different cases may be.
Mark, Jason, or Daniella, anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I
Sure.
think oh. I was just going to say that's okay. I support that as well. I think for us it really is about aligning with our initial business goals and targets, and as well creating business opportunities. Again, supporting the fact that it's important to have the head of customer success at the executive table, because ultimately you will create upfront your plan when you start the year, and part of these objectives needs to be linked to the customer success. Part of these targets needs to be linked to customer success, and that makes it much easier when you're starting to introduce technology within your organization, because you already have a view of the entire business goals and how customer success is going to contribute. Ultimately, customer success and the technology that you're bringing in will assist sales in achieving their goal as well, and will assist product in gaining the visibility that they require within that product. So I think having that view and ensuring that when you're looking at the technology and you're looking at the criteria for justifying that investment, that it not only meets your target, but it also assists in the overall business goals.
Yeah. So on our side here at Nulogy, I think what's most important is making sure that we automate what makes sense, and once there is a component of collaboration and a strategic pillar within our company that we drive for, I think it's beneficial for having a professionally enterprise-grade solution to evaluate. I'll be honest, probably early days, this is done on some kind of spreadsheets, and it can make sense with one person doing things. But as you grow up, professionalize it, and to really make it a tenet within the company, making sure that things are real time and automated. That's the way we evaluate things. We look at the process, we see how things are being done, and sometimes these things can be done ad hoc initially, but then soon after, once it's identified that customer success is so important to your organization, I think do it right the first time and just professionalize it, and that's the way we view purchasing of technology and applications.
That's a really good point, actually. You really want to scale your introduction of technology as you mature your organization. Especially at the early start of your organization, you do want to keep everything light in terms of the overhead that you're putting on your organization, because you might have one or two people. Keep it light as you're starting to introduce that technology, and then over time, as you mature, you want to make sure that you're selecting technology that is going to be able to grow with you and be implemented, operationalized as you scale, and you're able to better absorb and integrate with the rest of the organization.
Great answers. Thanks, everybody. We're starting to get some good questions coming in from the audience. So there's a couple of questions that are similar, so I'll put them together. How do you evaluate customer success at your company? How do you measure and evaluate the team? How do you know that you're getting the value that you're expecting to get from customer success?
That's a great question. And one of the things that you really want to do at first when you look at implementing customer success is aligning your customer. That's what we did at Salesforce, and we did at Radian6 as well, is that we first look at categorizing our customers. So you think about categorizing your customers maybe in a strategic category, then high priority customers, and then foundational customers. And so what you do is you tend to assign your CSM skills and seniority based on these different categories. So that's the first thing you want to try to consider as you're going to look at what you're going to be expecting from each of your CSM. Once you've done that, then you're going to do a second thing, which is understand what percentage of CSM you're going to be allocating to each of these different categories of customers. So of course you're going to have less strategic customers, but they are going to require more CSM percentage, more attention, and probably more investment from your company to make them successful. Now, once you've painted that picture and you understand where your CSMs are going to be spending time, then you start to take a look at the measurement that you're going to assign to each class. In some customers, in some companies that I've worked with, the measurement were actually the same in the different customer categories, and in another company that I worked with, it was different. So you really have to take a look at the type of customers in your market that you're working in. So some of the metrics that I've assigned and managed and monitored my CSMs with. So the first one is obviously customer retention. So that is our number one priority for us in terms of managing the churn, understanding the satisfaction of our customers, and ensuring that our customers stay with us so that we don't lose that revenue. So customer retention and customer churn is the first one. I actually, based on the portfolio of customers that the CSM is assigned, I will determine what churn percentage for the year that CSM should be managed against. And every quarter, I take a look at the revenue that the revenue portfolio that is assigned to that CSM, and I manage that on a quarterly basis. And we will assess the CSM's performance on a quarterly basis, whether they have retained the customers that they were supposed to, or whether there was any churn within that quarter. If there is any churn, we quickly assess why that was happening. You might have a misalignment of your CSM based on the categories of customer that he's been assigned to. That CSM may have too many customers and therefore not spending enough time on their customers, or it's just basically simply that you might have the wrong person assigned there. So customer churn is the first one. Revenue growth is the second one that we take a look at. And so again, within the year and within the quarter, we assign as we grow and as we mature as a company, based where we're at within our stage, we assign a percentage, a revenue dollar for growth for each of those CSM. And again, every quarter, we measure whether that revenue growth has occurred. Every quarter, the CSM is responsible to identify with the account team which project is going to create revenue growth in which customer, and then we tightly manage that. Other criteria that we measure the CSM performance is customer satisfaction. And so we do, depending again on the maturity of the organization that you're in, we do measure customer satisfaction either via survey or via quarterly vendor assessment, and that typically ends up being done on a yearly basis. Now, I do have, as an example, when I was with Salesforce, we actually had customer satisfaction done every quarter. So some customers were done in the first quarter, some customers were done in the second quarter. So in that type of model, I was able to actually get customer satisfaction data every quarter, and I could actually see how our CSMs were doing. So really, these are the major things that I manage our CSM with. I'll close with the last one, which is customer usage of our product. And so the CSM, one of their big responsibilities is to ensure that customer is using our product, they're using it well, they're actually growing and using the new functionality that are being developed and introduced with our offering. And because we're in the SaaS platform, we have great visibility of all that metrics. Every month and every quarter, I had reports that showed exactly the usage of our customer, and we also had documented, calculated an index of usage. And so for each CSM within their portfolio of customer, we identify a expected product usage. And whenever I saw and then we also assigned a percentage where it could be above and a percentage where it could be below. And if a customer were below where we were expecting the customer target to be, then we would sit down and again we would review and assess that. So those are some of the major criteria where we assess our CSMs with.
Great answer. Thanks, Daniella. We're getting a ton of questions coming in, and I'll keep asking those questions. But I want to dive into the topic of the day is how do you evaluate, given those types of metrics, those types of goals that you have for customer success, in specific, how would you evaluate an investment in customer success software? When does it make sense, and what would have you pull the trigger on making that investment?
Well, again,
all right.
Sorry, go ahead, Danielle.
Okay. So for me, and again, this is my fourth startup, and each of the fourth startups that we pretty much proceeded with generally the same pattern. You really want to do your investment as your company grows. You want to set up a light infrastructure as you get started, and put a healthy model, framework, approach right from the start. What's happening from a revenue standpoint, really early upfront in the customer deployment cycle, is that very often you're going to see a customer that buys, let's say, 100 seats, and you're going to see your second customer that comes in and buys 600 seats. Now, very quickly, you see your first customer where they might reduce a couple of seats, and you really don't know if the reduction of those seats is based on the fact that it's just, a normal change of operation or just housekeeping and they're cleaning up a couple of seats, or whether it's a start of an actual problem. And the problem is that if you don't pick up on that really upfront, it really, in terms of revenue loss, it really accumulates really quickly, and it really sneaks up. I can talk a little bit about Radian 6. When I was brought in to implement customer success at Radian 6, that's exactly what happened. They had a really high confidence up front because in the first year, we were getting so many customers and so much revenue, and we were selling, and really our revenue curve was really like a hockey stick. But underneath that curve of the hockey stick, what we didn't realize was that we were losing seats, and our seats were eroding, but we were selling so much that it was actually quickly overcoming that, but we were still losing revenue. We were still losing mind share, and we were ultimately still losing brands. Eventually, that erosion gets to a point where the customer really, you've lost satisfaction, you really lost them, but you really don't quite realize it yet until the brand says, well, I'm sorry, we had 1,500 seats, and slowly but steadily we've just been eroding, and now we're realizing there's just no value in us keeping our business relationship. If you don't catch that up front, you're just not going to realize that that's happening if you're selling well. If you're not selling well, you're going to see it right away. And so to me, in the 4 startups that I've worked with and in the startups that I'm working with right now, it's the same model. It's basically, probably you might not need it at your first CSM, but once you start getting 2, 3 CSMs, you really have to put that infrastructure in place. Now, the thing is that you don't want that initial infrastructure to be too large. And so you really start light, but you start right away on the right foot. The cost of having to recur back that brand that you've just lost, you will already have paid for that initial invest when you first start.
Great. Thanks, Daniella. Mark or Jason?
Yeah, I would echo. Go on, Mark, please.
No, I was just going to say I would echo that again. Whenever we're looking at an investment in any tool for whatever purpose, we always try and predefine what we're trying to achieve by investing in this tool and what are our expected outcomes and how are we able to measure those. So to the extent that we're able to identify those, it can make the investment decision very easy or much more complicated if the metrics and the outputs are softer. Sometimes some of the softer metrics are things like, well, it saves me this many minutes a day. Well, that's kind of hard to measure versus this process will assure that I'm going to increase my retention by 8%. 8%, I can very easily quantify what that means to my top and bottom lines.
Yeah, I would, just reiterate the similar comments. At a team of one, it didn't make sense when we scaled beyond that. We knew that we wanted the infrastructure, but the structure to scale, and a discipline behind it. So there's some soft benefits in terms of ensuring you have the discipline there and the structure. In terms of the hard benefits, it's measurement, at least for us. I remember when we looked at it, was how much more productivity would we be able to get in terms of management. So like if there was a CSM was managing a certain segment of the market for our customer base and managing X millions of dollars of SaaS, would that then be increased by 10% or 20% because their productivity and ability to have that much better pulse with their customers be greater. So it was a productivity sort of analysis from that perspective.
And I think the other thing I'd add to that as well is when you're first starting in a startup and in a product, really understanding your market and understanding what is going to make a customer success when you're introducing something new to the market sometimes is really difficult. And because you really don't quite know yourself exactly from a customer operationalization what's going to be needed for them to be successful. And so at first, you're going to be trying different models for a customer. You're going to be trying different things. And everything that you're trying, eventually at some point you're going to start to see success and you're going to say, okay, well, that tends to work for this market and this type of customer. And then you're going to try it on another customer and all of a sudden it doesn't work because you're in a different market. And so capturing that information up front, right from the start, is going to allow you to accelerate your success. Because what you're going to do is as you're starting to define what are the next blocks that you need to block in your roadmap to build that golden road for each customer, that customer success path or that journey, what's going to happen is that you're going to be able to capture that and to realize in what area in each of the markets are common, in what area in each of the markets that are different. And then that's at that point in time that you start mapping your journey. If you don't do it up front, what ends up happening is that you're going to be trying different things, but not quite clearly understanding if or what works. And you're going to be redoing some work, and you're going to be missing an opportunity to accelerate your success. And we've found that with Radiant 6, it was like that as well, because we had such a complexity in the different ways that our customers were using the product that we couldn't see the trees from the forest. It was really hard for us to understand why one customer was successful and another one wasn't. And it was because we weren't going enough to the depth of analyzing what we had done or what the customer had made us go through to make them successsul. So if you capture that up front, which means you start up front really putting that structure and that thinking, you're likely going to go faster.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Great answers. And we've got a big queue of questions here I'm going to turn to. One question is, if your customer success team is also responsible for renewals and upsell, how do you make sure that they don't get perceived as just another part of the sales team by your customer?
I might jump in here. We were having that problem, and what we've done is we've changed our model so that our customer success team, they are not focused on upsell at all. They are focused solely on retention and managing a relationship with the customer and identifying areas where there could be, kind of cross-sell or upsell opportunities of our products. But what we do is, if that's the case, they throw it over the fence to our new sales team, our hunters. They'll make the introduction and throw it over the fence so that we don't want it that the customers won't pick up the phone because they think that they're just getting called to be sold again and again and again. No, our team is all about managing the relationship and making sure we understand and are identifying our customer needs as our customers evolve too. And then if the customer comes to our customer success team and says, I want to buy blah, or I need an extra 100 users or whatever, then they will handle it, but they aren't out trying to sell the customer. They will identify opportunities and throw it over the fence to our sales team.
Yeah, it was similar to Radian6 and Salesforce as well. At first, Radian6, we had them do both sales, upsell. They had the responsibility, and they were compensated for it. And then we clearly saw that the same issue where, you don't develop the same relationship with the customer if the customer knows that you are there to sell them. And that was the number one issue that it was causing. The number two issue that it was causing was a clear ownership of who really owns that sale. And what you don't want to do is create competition between sales and CSM as to who's going to get that dollar. You really want that line clear. And one of the way that you do that, in an account team or in a sales team, how you predict the result is by how you're going to be compensating them. And so that's going to help you direct where they're spending their attention. And so what we end up doing is exactly that, is we made it very clear that sales own sales, they own the dollar, they own the contract. CSMs were never allowed to quote. They could talk about product, they could talk about features and functionalities, and uncover the opportunity that would allow the account to grow. And at the point where they were ready to really start talking sales, that's when we just tossed it, the same thing. We opened up a sales lead in our CRM, and then the account executives jumped in and took that over. And so at that point in time, when we made that switch, we then measured and comped the CSM differently, even though we rewarded them on the customer growth, because ultimately what's going to happen, they have a really big role in playing in the growth of the revenue. Ultimately, if they're going to grow, it's probably because the CSM was doing the right thing. And so they will probably say, well, then why am I not rewarded for that? You have to reward them differently. And there's several different ways to do that. The other thing you want to think a lot hard on is on the professional service side as well, which is again, it's tied to the revenue. Is that when you first start, your CSM tends to do a lot more. We tend to give a lot more services for free to our customers because we really want that initial revenue, and that's really important. It's going to be a point in time where you're going to scale. You're going to have many customers. You need to increase your CSM to customer ratio. Therefore, you can't give that services away for free. So you're going to have to start thinking about at what point have you earned the right to start charging for your professional services. So you also have to keep that in mind in terms of the equation. Who gets comped and what are they going to get comped on in terms of selling that services, because very often that part of the sales process happens and is executed by the CSM in terms of selling the value of bringing somebody in. But ultimately, again, the sales executive will finalize, make the contract, and talk about the dollars.
Great, thanks, Daniella. A question just came in that I think is all aimed at Jason. For anybody that's actually implemented a customer success platform What were the actual benefits that you got using a customer success platform?
I can speak to that. It did get there's some certainly soft benefits that first came out. It was everyone in the company knew that we were implementing a solution, which means that it was an area of focus. And I think that special groups need special things. So this is a special group of customer success managers that wanted their own purpose-built solution for that, and that got people very excited. It could allow them to configure and then also be that day-to-day portal of how they manage their customer cohorts and so forth. It also meant that we could also extract metrics from there and make that visible to the rest of the company too, which makes everyone think about the customer first and foremost. And the benefit of that is great. And then finally, one I said earlier on before was the hard benefits in terms of productivity. Hard to say maybe if we didn't have a platform to launch our customer success programs on. We also have our user conference that happens, and I think that it's just there was a productivity that was increased because everyone then had a same song sheet to manage their customers and be very customer focused on and manage more, quite frankly, ACV or MRR within that within what they were doing day to day. Those are some of the concrete areas I think that we would benefit from.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Mark or Danielle, anything to add to that question?
I don't really, because we haven't implemented a customer success software solution as of yet. We're still growing up to that kind of level, but it's probably not in a too distant horizon.
I would say the same thing as well. What we ended up doing is because at that time when we were doing with Radian 6 product like that were not available, but I can say that we spent an extraordinary amount of time between my business analyst and a couple of other people to really do what Paul is doing with his company, and it's all about building. How do I manage red account flags? How do I manage? Where do I find the information for my contract, and I get updated as to when the latest renewal is going to occur, and how do the work that I'm doing fits into the renewal cycle, and what am I influencing? It was so hard to find some of that information, and we spent an awful lot of time trying to manually map that, and it was incredibly hard to get that visibility. I wish I would have had that platform when we were ramping up at Radian 6. It certainly would have been helpful. But ultimately, we were spending the money. In fact, we were spending a lot more money with a lot less results. You have to do it. You are going to have to manage your red account flags, whether you do it manually or whether you do it within your CRM. And then the problem is that a lot of that data is stored today in many different places, and the CSMs end up having to manually try to consolidate that together. And every CSM is doing it, and then ultimately it's a pretty high overhead on your CSM to have to do that. So one of the things we constantly did was to take a look at, I really want my CSM to focus on their customer time. How do I make that happen? And I did an assessment of where my CSM were spending their time, and it was a fair amount of time. It was a constant struggle and a constant question on how do we make that better.
Now, Danielle, what you're speaking about there just makes me think about how we implemented, obviously Amity. In our case, that we select, we did go through a selection process, and we were at that time using Salesforce, and we still do on the sales side, and connecting. So our customer success group sort of lives and breathes within Amity, right? So that's their that's their go-to platform, but it only is because we also were able to connect the front end process with Salesforce to feed into there, but also even in our case, our support systems, Zendesk and so forth on the back end. So it is that loop. I thought that, just makes me think about how we went about implementing it on our side.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I analyzed, I had mandated one person to actually develop a CSM console because you mentioned Salesforce, but Salesforce is a great tool for sales, and when you take a look at everything that they've put in terms of their tools to support the sales in terms of the revenue, and when you take a look at the tools that were available for CSM, there just wasn't any. And so we sat down and we took a look at building a CSM console. And it's interesting because now when I look at the Amity application, all the different components that we were looking at building are actually all there. But the cost for me to have built that is actually what stopped me from doing it, because it was cost prohibitive to actually develop such a large platform. And it came down to the fact that when we had to integrate, because you have to integrate with the CRM, you have to take a look at your financial system, you have to take a look at your ticketing system and your email system, and that doesn't even include the component that your roadmap and your journey to manage all the different steps that you're going to bring your customers through. That was new. There was nobody doing that, and we had no idea how we were going to do it, and ultimately the initiative was too big. We put a stop to it.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Last question from the audience, a quick one, is what KPIs do you report to the CEO or the board about customer success?
Yeah, so I can talk to that a bit. In terms of the KPIs, I've always seen the KPIs in kind of a two-tiered metrics. The first KPIs that are most primary importance is the revenue growth, your customer brand churn, and your revenue churn. Those are top of mind, and it impacts directly the bottom line and the business. And then I take a look at the second tiers of metrics, which are equally important. The first one is obviously customer satisfaction. So depending on at what maturity level your company is, you probably have different ways to measure that. But that is typically one thing I've always reported on. And the second one that I reported on was the CSM to customer ratio. And so because that went directly to my operational cost. And so you're always, again, at your the different levels and maturity of your company, your CSM to customer ratio is going to change. And so that's something you always want to continuously report on and explain the either deviation or changes that you're making, which ultimately will impact your cost of operation. And then the third component that I always reported on was product usage. And so how our customers are using the product, why they're using it, what product they tend to like the most and leverage the most and create more value, and what area has the most stickiness and therefore increasing our value. So those are some of the characteristics that I talked about and KPIs I reported on.
We're pretty similar, but we divided a little bit more between internal metrics that we look at in terms of management versus what we report to our board.
Mm-hmm.
So very similarly, we look at revenue retention and customer or logo retention, but we stratify it based on our small customers, our mid-market, and our enterprise customers, because we want to look at how our different customer success managers are managing customers, and as our CSMs are maturing, are they maturing with the customer as well? The other thing we look at, so that's our net retention. We also look at gross retention, wherein we also include our upsell numbers, upsell and cross-sell, just to see are the customers that we have actually not only staying with us but buying more. And we expect different churn metrics at different size of customer as well. But internally, we look at that ratio of number of accounts per CSM, Again, the bigger, more complicated accounts, there's fewer accounts per CSM because they require more time at the enterprise level versus the small, high volume customers. So, that tend to churn more often because they either grow into bigger companies or they grow out of being a company altogether.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other point that you remind me of as well is the other.
Daniella, I'm gonna have to jump in because we could talk all day, but we're actually at the end of our time. So first, I want to thank all the panelists, Daniella, Jason, Mark. Great answers, great content, and really, I think we could talk for another couple of hours. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules for today's event. I really appreciate that, and I hope the audience appreciates that. And for people in the audience, Amity has a really easy to use, very powerful customer success platform. If you'd like to talk about how that can be the foundation of your growth, of your scalability, just let us know. Come to the website, make a meeting request or a demo request. We'd love to talk to you. And we have a special for everyone who attended today. We're going to be putting out a white paper tomorrow called the ROI of Customer Success Software, and we're going to email that to everyone that attended the webinar today as a thank you gift. So thank you very much. Our next webinar is on February 23rd. It's a kickoff of a whole series of webinars on scaling customer success that I'll be doing with Kia Poom. Kia used to be the Senior Vice President of Customer Experience at Eloqua and Oracle, and she's out on her own helping other SaaS companies do that for themselves today. So the first session of that series is on defining and managing your customer lifecycle, and that's on February 23rd. That'll be a great session. Great. Thanks again to Daniella, Jason, and Mark. What a great hour. Wish we could do more. Thanks everyone for attending today. And if you have any follow-up questions, just let me know. Paul at Get Amity, and we'll get you answers to all of your questions. And thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.